back with another episode of The Process. I haven't done the intros a lot, so I'm actually like a little shaky on it. Um, today, today we're reflecting on the idea of this almost like illusion that like there's an easier path and a harder path, and that there's you can take the easy path and somehow that's a viable option. I think a lot of the marketing in the sales space that we've been a part of, a lot of the people that have gone into the sales space, this idea of like leaving the 9 to 5 rat race and being able to like kick your feet back and take calls from clients that are just begging to give you their money because they desperately need your help.
begging
If
you,
anyone,
begging
right.
you. Like people are like,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds ridiculous
Jesus,
now, right? But like if you're green and you come into the space,
sounds
that's
amazing.
definitely that's kind of the expectation you have. And then the people that survive in the space for more than a year, like Marco and I have, realize that obviously that's marketing, and obviously it's actually probably harder than a 9 to 5 to do sales sustainably,
Mhm.
to do it for a long enough time. Anybody can jump on an offer on a bandwagon where people are doing great, the lead flow's killing it, the marketing's dialed in, and just be an order taker and make good money. But it's actually really tough to be able to weather the storm for a career in sales. I've
Yeah.
noticed, Marco's noticed, and again, this is just my opinion. So anyone that has a problem with it can kindly fuck off. But that's what I have seen. And it's interesting because I used to think that like there's this guy, I think Andrew Kirby is his name. He's a smart guy. He's on YouTube. A lot of people know him, Andrew Kirby. Um, and he was talking about, he had this video about like the path of least resistance that I used to watch when I was younger, like 19, 20, 21, however old I was. And he was talking about like to build a life where you're optimizing for the path of least resistance. Instead of making it hard for yourself, try to like gamify your life to where it's just easy and you're kind of just following the stream of like you're effortlessly exactly who you want to be. And I don't know, partaking on the journey of personal growth, I've learned that you have to confront yourself at an extreme level, but also obstacles. Like you have and actually the book from Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way, I think is actually more apt to what reality actually gives us and serves us, which is that things in life are going to suck, whether we like it or not. And in order to become a better version of ourselves, we have to face those challenges because they refine us. They make us more pure. They strengthen our character. They give us more maturity. Like if I look back at anything that I've gained since I was 15 years old, an ignorant, dumb 15-year-old kid that knew nothing about the world, everything that I have gained, all the assets in terms of my maturity, my mindset, my just whatever, patience with people, which I have very little, but nevertheless, all of that stuff came from very traumatic experiences or tough challenges where I had to overcome those things. They weren't from like just following a water slide of joy to where I am now, right? Marco, what do you think about that? That's kind of the opening thesis, but do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Where would you kind of diverge on that?
I, I had a conversation with Chat GPT this morning about pain and suffering because I think that's an important distinction to bring up. And so I want to share my screen to take a look at it because I think it's important. So let's see. We don't want to look at that. Come on now.
Zoom. Yeah,
Zoom.
by the way, guys, we
Zoom.
are being sponsored by Zoom.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah, we have
you
a Zoom sponsorship. So yeah, exactly. So here we go. So all right. So here it is, right? Just asking as far as the distinction. And so here, oh my God, just get this thing out of the way already. Here we go. Nice. All right. So pain, the physical and emotional sensation. Pain refers to the raw physical or emotional experience that signals something is wrong or requires attention. Examples: a broken leg, a headache, grief from losing a loved one. It's often unavoidable. Our bodies and minds react to injury, loss, or trauma. Temporary and localized. Pain is directly tied to an event or condition. In essence, pain is neutral in nature. It's just the body or psyche giving us information. Cool. All right. Now, suffering, the meaning and mental amplification. Suffering, on the other hand, is more subjective and mental. It occurs when we attach stories, resistance, or identification to pain. Examples: feeling stuck in resentment, regret, or longing for something to be different than it is. Suffering arises from judgment. This shouldn't be happening, or attachment. I can't be happy unless this changes. It's often prolonged because it's tied to the mind's relationship with the pain, not the pain itself. The key concept in Eastern traditions like Buddhism is that while pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The mind's resistance to impermanence and change tends to create suffering. All right. How to apply this distinction? Pain, acknowledge it, feel it fully in the moment without avoidance. Suffering, notice where mental loops, expectations, or resistance are adding unnecessary burden. For example, if someone you love passes away, the grief, pain is natural. But regretting things left unsaid or wishing life was different, suffering adds layers to the experience. Through mindfulness, acceptance, and presence, we can feel pain without clinging to suffering. All right, now a little bit more. Where is it? How we create suffering. Resistance to reality. This shouldn't be happening. Attachments and expectations. I can't be happy unless things go my way. Identity traps. This pain defines me, or I always fail. Rumination. Replaying past events and worrying about the future. The more we identify with these thoughts, the heavier the suffering becomes. How to let go of suffering without dismissing pain. Mindfulness. Recognize thoughts as passing events, not facts. Acceptance. Allow the pain to be present without resistance. Detachment. Practice letting go of outcomes and expectations. This doesn't mean indifference, but a willingness to flow with life's changes. Reframing meaning. Ask, what can I learn from this? Or how does this serve my growth? This ties in beautifully into the original question, what are we willing to suffer for? When suffering serves purposeful growth, it transforms into something closer to challenge or sacrifice, not suffering for suffering's sake. Boom. There we go.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, man, ChatGPT did a great job. I think from now on, I'm just gonna pass over
Every
all
response is
hosting.
just like
Yeah, just all whatever topic
that
we
should be
have.
our show. We just like we just like read a ChatGPT
It's
back and forth.
just like, what do you think of this? And they're like, here it is. I'm like, there it is,
Yeah.
folks. Fucking welcome to the process, powered by ChatGPT. Um, I think one of my favorite things that has come out of the addition of video game technology into our lives is the fact that more and more people are looking at this as like we can gamify our life. Like gamify your
Mhm.
life. It's fun. It's a fun thing to do. And I think that concept's been around, I think, forever, man. Like, let's just look at a video game. What's a video game? It's a storyline that you're playing out. That's all it is. Same thing with a movie. Same thing with a book. All right. When people are always saying like art imitates life, well, life imitates art. It's I mean, which direction do you want to go with it?
Yeah. So the suffering thing is interesting because like, and again, I'm doing what Trump would call the weave. We're going in a random direction, then I'm going to bring it back. I thought
That's
that was so
totally
funny when he
fine,
said that.
Wesley. I think the way we weave on this show is really the best kind
Did
of
you see
weave.
the Did you see the Andrew Schultz interview that he did? It was so fucking hilarious.
No,
That guy's
dude.
funny. Whether or not I'll vote for him is another thing, but he's funny.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
but okay, so to
Got
do
all
the weave
political and
thing,
shit here.
yeah, to get out the
Take it back to the weave.
get back to where we were. So it's interesting with the suffering thing. Like, have you suffered in your life?
That's I've only suffered in my life because of what I've done up here.
Right, but you have suffered, right? And
Yeah,
so have
yeah, of
I.
course. We all have. We all have. Yeah, we all.
Everybody suffered. So
Yeah.
this idea that suffering no one's going to experience it. I understand your point. I understand that what you're saying is like the way that we perceive a certain event dictates how we feel about it. For example, when the topic of like detaching from a call and lowering your expectations, that's a mental frame by which you suffer less, because now I'm like, oh, I don't really give a shit. So then you get on the call and you just see it as, who cares, right? I'm just like, I'm gonna have fun later with something else, and you're not, versus someone that's like trying to get the close and they're taking it serious, like everything that someone says, they're going to really have a tough day. And it's the same exact experience, but it's the way that you're perceiving that experience. So I get that. But you brought in ChatGPT, so I want to bring it into, there's this concept of a paradigm, which Bob Proctor popularized. Um, I'll read this briefly. So a
You got to bring
paradigm
in
is a,
Chat GPT to counter my Chat GPT. This
yeah,
motherfucker.
I'm gonna fuck,
No,
we're going to AI word right now.
let's do it.
Uh, okay, a paradigm is a model, framework, or pattern of thinking that shapes how we understand and interpret the world and includes the set of beliefs, values, methods, and assumptions shared by a group or society, guiding how people view a particular issue or subject. Um, so in 2022, when I started my sales journey, my mission statement or whatever was challenge my paradigm, because I had this hardwired set of beliefs and perceptions of the world that I knew weren't sustainable. Like they were going to lead to my destruction, and I had to change them. But currently, I was unable to do that. Like I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have the mental tools to be able to break it. So my whole like goal for the whole year was like challenge it. Like at least get, you know, show a chink in the armor. Like crack the paradigm a little bit, say like, oh shit, like there is another possibility of life. And so I set goals for myself that I didn't think were possible, and that was like me challenging the paradigm, because I'm doing exactly what it's like, no, you can't do that. And it's like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And so I agree with you, but I think people also have these paradigms of the world and of reality and these beliefs about themselves and others and whatever that dictate how we live. And those can't just be, I don't feel like they can be fixed by just saying like, oh yeah, just change your mind on that. Like that paradigm, I think, has to be, is cracked and changed from extreme pressure, will crack that paradigm and cause you to see the world differently. It's not going to come from just like a sudden, maybe you'll have an enlightenment like Buddha, right? And you'll have this crazy epiphany,
Well,
but
well, keep in mind though, man, it's a practice, and Buddha's enlightenment wasn't just this one day thing. Like the dude did the work, and he was on this journey for years, and his whole lead up to him getting to that place, there was a lot of work he had to do. He went from one extreme to the next. Like, he was a prince and he lived this lavish life, and then at one point he was hanging out with all these yogis in caves and putting himself in voluntary suffering. And then he's like, wait a minute, this is all bullshit, right? And I think what you're saying, look, it makes sense. Some people, and they call it in Zen Buddhism, they call it moments of satori, where you have a flash of enlightenment, and it usually, there's this funny, and I've had these moments of just this pure realization where I'm caught in laughter and realizing that it's the perfect moment, and it's a fleeting thing. It's a very
Mhm.
fleeting thing, and part of it, and it's been done when like I'm sweeping some dirt up, or
Yeah.
last week, when I was doing a job for a friend, hauling for a friend of mine, an old man, and I was hauling dirt from one of his rentals to the dump. Like I'm literally hauling dirt, right? And it's like heavy bags, and I'm having this workout, right? Because at first I was like, oh God, like he misestimated the job, and it became a 2 day thing. And I'm like, at first there was that moment of resistance where I was like, fuck, this is gonna, and then I'm like, no, reframe. You're gonna get a good workout from this. I was like, yeah, I am. 80-pound bags, some of them, right? Fucking loading those bitches up at the dump, ripping them apart, just getting dirt all over me, right? Doing something that I normally don't do. I used to do shit like that all the time, but here we are, right? We live in the remote lifestyle. And there was a moment of reframe with that, right? And so yeah, I think in order for someone's paradigm to shift, number one, they've got to realize that they actually have a paradigm that they're operating in, right? That there's
Mhm.
patterns that they work off of. and that there's got to be something significant to happen in their life for them to be like you were saying, your experience where you're like, if I keep living life this way, it's not going to work out well.
Yeah.
Like something's got to change, right? And so you said pressure, sure, pressure, and what does pressure do? What's the famous saying that people say about pressure, right? Pressure creates diamonds.
Right.
Right?
Well, it's like like they the comfort zone, right? I feel like that's our perimeter of our paradigm. Like the comfort
Yeah,
zone is kind of
that's
just like
yeah.
what we're accustomed to, and they always say like growth, like when you're lifting weights, everybody uses that analogy, and it hurts because you're breaking the muscle and rebuilding it.
Yeah.
So I think like this whole point of like pursuing discomfort, and like Goggins would just directly say suffer, like you need to suffer, which we can
Which
have our opinions on that.
yeah, and I think again, it's like it's just a matter of definition. Like really, like
Yeah,
if
part
Goggins
of it's
wants to,
semantical
I
for
think it
sure.
is for him. I think it is because if he wants to just fucking call it suffering, it's like, all right, go ahead, dude.
Yeah, it
I'd rather
sounds
not.
cooler, but it's
Yeah, it does, but I'd rather not though. That's the thing, right?
yeah,
It's kind
yeah,
of like
I get you.
if we don't have to, then why? Because it sounds cooler. Because like it's
But
like
here's the thing, like, do you think that mindset of, well, if I don't have to suffer, why do it? Do you think that mindset allows people, encourages people to push past their paradigm, or do you feel like it encourages them to justify their actions and just
I
stay where they're at?
I think it does both for people. But the thing is this, I think there's levels of awareness. There's always going to be levels to this game of personal development. There's always going to be levels of this game of spiritual development. To me, again, it's the same fucking thing. It is the same thing. And ultimately, what are we driving at? We're driving at some type of liberation. And it's liberation from ourselves, our own bullshit, our limiting beliefs, all the crap that we've built up over the years, right?
Right.
Like you right now in your mid to late 20s are doing this work. You've got
Hmm.
more awareness than most other dudes, especially young men in your peer group. And it changes as you get older, right? It's like
Yeah.
some guys just won't change and they get stuck in their paradigm. And before you know it, they're like that fucking 55-year-old guy that you used to work with who's like,
Yeah.
smoking cigarettes and drinking a Monster at 6 in the morning, going, man, fuck this, man. I'm almost done and I'll be out of here. I'm gonna do meth later tonight and fucking maybe, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And that
Well,
is
I
his.
understand. I understand your point because I think what you're saying is like you have to have hope at the end of the tunnel. Like you have to say, like this can't just be like I'm trying to like put myself in a shittier situation than what I'm in. I think is what you're kind of what you're getting at. Like with the suffering thing, it's like, well, this isn't hell. Like this is actually beautiful, and it like the work that you were describing, like it's a workout, and it's going to make me stronger, and I'm enjoying it, and there's an element that I can tap into. Um, but I do think that like to get to that point of growth, you do have to put yourself in a situation that you currently think is uncomfortable, that you don't want to do, and then eventually you strengthen yourself to where you kind of callous over your mind. That's actually a Goggins phrase, but you callous your mind enough to where you're like, oh wait, this actually isn't sucky. I was sucky. I didn't understand that this I can actually handle this. And then you start to like build that inner confidence and belief. Well, let me just give a real quick detour because I read I reviewed his first book the other day because I wanted some inspiration, and he was talking about how he was this overweight, unsuccessful loser guy, and he was watching the television, and he saw these Marines that were like super badass, and they were going through Hell Week, and they were like sweating and bloody and shaking and just like being tortured for 48 hours straight or however long it is, a whole week. But there was a 48-hour stint where they were just like in the ocean, just eating shit all day. And they were tough and they were resilient. And he's like, fuck, like he said part of him like admired that about them because he realized in himself he wouldn't be able to uh he wouldn't be able to endure those experiences, but these guys were resilient. And he said there's some truth that's hidden in that suffering. There's truth that's hidden in that suffering, and he was compelled by it, and that's why he joined the Marines. And when he joined the Marines, he realized that
In the
the
Navy. He was a
suff
Navy SEAL.
yeah, the Navy, sorry. And he realized that the suffering is actually what when you embrace what you think is suffering, it's what builds that resilient mind to where you become a strong a callous person. You become stronger, and you realize that yes, this seems unbearable, but I'm strong enough to bear it, kind of thing. You start to develop that resilience in your mind, and that only comes from embracing what you currently believe to be suffering, because your paradigm has limits, and it has, like what Goggins would talk about, like a governor on your mind, where it's like, well, we can only go this far. Past that is impossible. We can't do that. um I would define that as suffering. Yes, it's a perception. It's not universally true. My suffering is different than your suffering, right? Like for me, it hurts to get out of bed sometimes. I deal with depression, right? For you, it's like, what the fuck are we talking about? I get up at 5 a.m. every day. But we
Not
live in
every day,
different
Monday
paradigms.
through Friday at 4. Uh, well, I think
Yeah.
so. Here's
It
here's
would
here's the thing.
so
Here's the thing. Like, I'm a stickler for language, and I think that's a consequence of my philosophy background, because it's really important that we choose our words carefully, because that does frame reality. That does frame the conversation. Um, and granted, our subconscious mind does not speak in language; it speaks in images. Right now, we're here on this realm having this conversation. The saying in the military is embrace the suck. It's embrace the suck. It's not embrace the suffering. It's embrace the suck. The acknowledgement is that we're in a shitty situation and it sucks. It's raining, you're cold, and you're muddy. Okay, here's the thing though. Here's the thing. You can bitch and moan about it, or you can laugh about it with your buddies. Which one's going to have more longevity? Laughing about it with your buddies. And I speak from experience. We had a guy once in our platoon. His name was Dan Coolidge. That was his last name, right? And this kid played himself off as this fucking hard ass little gangster from New York. He wasn't. He was a little bitch. And he would complain and complain and complain and complain like no one's fucking business. Now, we were in Kuwait. It was hot as fuck. Right? We're talking 120, 130 degrees. It's hot. No one's having a good time. Right? As far as the heat goes, it's just like you're like there, but whatever. So we're smoking cigarettes or hanging out and just and bullshit, telling jokes and stuff like that. Dan Coolidge, we're having to do this detail. We got to clean up some shit, and he's just bitching about it. When fucking at one point, dude, we all got together and we took turns just beating the shit out of him to have him shut the fuck up, right? And it wasn't anything bad, right? It was just like just slapping around, wrestling match, that kind of a thing. Except for one guy, Swenson. Now keep in mind, Swenson was this was fucking 30 years ago when this shit
mhm.
happened, right? And Swenson was this really calm, unassuming kid from Minnesota. I think he was like a fucking what was he, dude? He was like a Jehovah's Witness or some shit, dude. Right? Like surprising that he was like in the military, and he looked like Steve Martin. He was the one that just wailed on Dan Coolidge like no one's fucking business. Right? We had to like pull him off. We're like, okay, that's enough, dude. After that ass beating, Dan Coolidge was cool. He was just like no longer being a little bitch and bitching about things. Because the thing was this, is that his bitching was bringing it down, was killing the morale. And it was one of those things that he was wanting to be in suffering. He was wanting to be like, this fucking sucks. Oh my God. He was resisting the whole thing, resisting, resisting, resisting. And when you're
Right.
around that type of attitude, then it starts fucking with your head. This is why we're very careful about our mindset when it comes to, sales or whatever. Doesn't matter whether it's in sales or whatever. You've got that one guy who wants to be married to that form of resistance and just make it into the worst fucking thing. And it's the worst day ever. And this is, oh my God, and
Yeah,
blah,
I
blah, blah,
got
blah,
you.
blah. Yeah. And, and,
I
and
think
so,
he I think he's I would argue that he wasn't doing the work that Goggins was doing in terms of, this sucks, but I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to lean into this suffering. I think he was, what you're talking about is the optimism versus cynicism.
well,
Like,
no, he again, just it's the thing is this, it goes back to that. He was just resisting the whole thing. Goggins isn't resisting it. Goggins is embracing it. Now he wants to use the word suffering and he wants to say callous your mind. Okay, what is a callus? Right? Where how do you gain a callus when you're working out, you're working with your hands? It's the skin that is just now hardening over time, right? Because what was there was soft and now it gets tougher. Same thing. You get tougher up there.
Right.
And so I mean it's like here's the again, it goes back like pain is optional. Pain's baked into the process. It's part of having a physical existence. It's the suffering that makes the difference. That what you know what we bring to the table. Again, it's one of those things. I mean, we can make light of any shitty situation if we really wanted to. Any situation if we really wanted to, and we can do the inverse. Which one's going to be heavier? Literally, right?
Yeah. I think you're giving people like you're kind of arguing for like optimism. Like you're saying we need to be optimistic in any situation versus cynical. Like optimist is looking at it in the bright way, and cynicism is looking at all the which I fall privy to a lot, looking at all the bad things and why it won't work.
Cynicism's easy, dude. Cynicism is that is the easiest thing to succumb to because that is, I mean, look at our how our brains are wired. Essentially, our brains are wired for scarcity because this is like evolutionary psychology stuff, right? Like going back to caveman days, like you had to
Yeah.
fucking fight really hard for survival. Good luck making it past 30, right? And when you came across, you know, basically sweet things or high calorie content, you would gorge them, right? Say like a beehive and honey or some shit. But for the most part, it was just like you're hunting and gathering. And
Mhm.
so, you know, if we're talking, we're constantly fighting against gravity of our you know, neo mammalian brain, which did us a lot of favors when it came to survival mode. And now that we are in this like world of abundance, literally, we really are, especially if you live here in the United States of you know the USA. This is why it's super important that we do the work that we do when it comes to personal development.
Yeah. I do think it's dangerous though, and because I do feel like there's this mindset virus that goes around where it's like, oh dude, the vibes were off with that, or the energy or whatever. And it's like this whole thing where it's like, let's just stay in a pocket where we just feel good about ourselves and not actually lean into the things that are shitty. Because I do think that like if you intentionally pursue suffering, I think it transmutes itself as meaning on the other end of it. But like for example, you said, we've all suffered. So it's going to be an inevitable thing. It's going to happen again. Despite this conversation, we're still going to experience this paradigm, this perception of suffering, whether it was actually suffering or not. And easy example is like when my grandpa dies, that's going to be suffering. Like I'm not going to be like, yeah, this is painful, but it's like, a beautiful pain or whatever. Like currently I don't know how to deal with that. And I was watching like and Andrew Garfield, his mom died. Uh and he was open about it, and he was talking to Anderson Cooper on CNN, and I listened to it yesterday about grief. And he changed like after it. Like he wasn't equipped to process what happened. It was traumatic, but through that experience he was able to find meaning in the pain, in the suffering, and realize that this has been something that since from human time, most sons have watched their mother die, and this is a common level of consciousness that he wasn't tapped into, but now he's tapped into it, and he's like, oh shit. And now he sees the world totally different than what he used to see it. But he had to go through that. He had to like embrace, and it was sucky, and he said it was like he would define that as suffering. But on the other end of it, now he would, he's a different man. He evolved. I don't know if he would say it's suffering now, right? Like now he has gathered meaning from it and come to terms with it and made sense of it. But when you're going through it, the experience, no matter how you position it, is like sometimes it's just gonna suck. Like I feel like there are things, no matter how we position it, that sometimes things just in life happen that are tragic, but bearing that cross and being able to go through it with faith and optimism and hope that there's a better future for you, you'll come to the other side where you're renewed. Like my grandpa, he's experienced his dad die at when he was 16. He's or 15. He experienced all sorts of crazy shit. And so now he's like this very like refined person where nothing really phases him. People don't
Mhm.
piss him off. Like, and that's what I'm saying is like the patience that he has, the perspective that he has, the love that he shows for people all came from suffering that was transmuted into meaning after bearing it. But when he was going through it, he had a different perception of it. And so that's all I'm saying is like it's like accepting the pill versus acting like the pill doesn't exist. I think is my point is like go ahead.
Let's accepting the pill is literally not having resistance to it. That's
Mm.
that's the whole point. Like again, yes, people suffer because of up here, but not everybody does. Like once you get to a certain level of understanding and practice, then you can experience things for what they are. You can still recognize that that hurts on an emotional level, on a feelings level, on a physical level. But if I'm going to attach a story to it, this again, this is all a practice, and it's all levels of awareness within your life practice. And so if you want to look at things as suffering and you want to frame it that way and you want to use that particular verbiage, okay. I'd rather not, because that just implies that I'm resistant to it, that I'm not accepting to it, that it just paints this whole picture that I'm like, nah, I'd rather not. It just doesn't appeal to me anymore. It's like getting up at 4 in the morning when I do on my regular schedule. Yeah, it sucks. I want to stay in bed a little bit longer. I still get up. It's like, okay. And I'm still going to do my day. There's sometimes when I don't want to work out because I'm like, I don't feel like it, but I'm still going to. And you know, having moments where I've been super broke and this and that, and going and it just I think there might be a difference in word use and how we're looking at it by being attached to a certain label. And I'd rather not have that label there because of just the connotations of what suffering means. It just it's just and I don't necessarily think it's about an optimism. I just think it's about a lightness of being, if you will, of like this is how
Perhaps.
it this I'm like this is how it is. Okay, this is how it
So
is.
do you feel like you will, I know you got to leave in a minute, but do you feel like you will suffer again in the future?
If I allow it, if I want to be there. Look, man, I've had my dad die. I've had brothers die. I've had best friends die. My mom went through stage 4 cancer not too long ago, right? You and I became friends
Yeah,
then.
I remember that.
You know, I don't get to see my son very often. At least I get to see him. We have a friend who hasn't seen any of his kids in years, right? And it's been a practice. Here's the thing: all of this has been a practice, and I choose to see this as such. I could be woe is fucking me,
Yeah.
or I could be like, this is how it is. What are you gonna do about it?
I agree with you. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think when we go through the suffering, I think we come out the other side with a renewed mindset, like you seem to have right now. Because I would argue, I don't even know what I know some of the stuff you've been through, but when you first experienced those things as a young man like myself,
Mm.
did you perceive it as it's this optimistic thing, or
No,
were you
no, but
perceiving it as
again,
fuck, this is
again,
hell?
again, like I said, dude, levels of awareness and practice. I did not have any of these things back in the day. None of it,
Right. So
right?
I would
And so,
argue, would you agree that you gained that perspective that you have, which is a beautiful perspective? And that's one of the reasons why we're close friends, because you reframe a lot of shitty things as like, dude, it's okay. Like we're gonna be okay. And your comedy, I can tell you've developed comedy to lean into that, like to antidote to darkness type of shit, because you always make light of everything. But do you feel like you gained that personality of Marco that exists right now that we're talking to because of all the shit that you had to go through and
yeah, of
because you
course,
suffered all that
of
stuff?
course, dude. I mean, think about who are the people who get into fucking personal development, spirituality, therapy, and coaching. Who are the people who do that? The fucked up ones. The people who aren't fucked up usually don't become therapists or life coaches or get into personal development, right? They just don't.
Right.
It's those of us who are fucked up who decide, dude, we're fucked. Something's wrong. I'm not okay. All right, why am I not okay? And all those experiences, like my humor and comedy, defense mechanism, all fucking
So
day long.
that's all I'm saying because
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be combative. I swear to God, and I know like
No, no,
who
no,
gives
no.
a fuck about
I
the
don't.
recording,
I'm not
but
interpreting this
like,
as combative at all.
but I have to bring this up. So
Yeah.
we had a friend that died,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I feel very strongly because I deal with some of the same things he does.
Yeah.
He killed himself from
Yeah.
depression.
Yeah.
If you were to tell him, dude, just look at the happy side of life. It's not suffering. Just deal with it. Like just look at that. He would say, but dude, who gives a fuck? Like none of this matter. Like what Dave was saying when we had that mental health thing, he'd be like, bro, I don't care. Like I'm tired. I just want to be done.
Yeah.
And for me, what's helping me is like instead of saying the suffering doesn't exist, to just say, you know what? This fucking sucks. I don't want to live. I don't want to be alive. This is shitty. No matter how I reframe it, I can't see a bright side up, which some people in this world have that paradigm. I'm one of the people that has that paradigm. Maybe some people in this call listening are blessed to not have that existence, and I'm so happy for you. It's hard for me to frame an optimistic side of the universe, but I can tap into if I can push through, even though it seems meaningless, even though it's painful and it's like it's suffering and the way I'm experiencing it, if I can push through it with intention and remain optimistic and have faith and be hopeful, I believe that I can come out the other side stronger and I will have a renewed perspective and I will challenge my paradigm and my paradigm will change. My paradigm will become maybe more like yours, where I'll say, you know what? There's a whole other side of the world. There's a whole other side of reality that I didn't even see because I was blind. It's like what Jesus was saying. I bring it up all the time, but it's such a huge reframe where like the people that were spitting in his face and torturing him, this innocent guy that literally whatever, he's like, God forgive them. They don't even know what they're doing. Like they were just blind to a bigger reality in that story that was going on. They were just blind to a story. So I'm aware of that. I'm willing to accept, you know, I'm a human being with finite knowledge and information. Like I could be lying to myself. Like this paradigm, like you're saying, of suffering doesn't have to be permanent. If I believed it was a permanent thing and there was no way out, maybe I wouldn't be here. Who knows? But I do have hope that the suffering can have meaning. But I what I'm saying is like I can't make sense of it now, but that's not a reason to not push through it. That's not a reason to not embrace the suffering because avoiding it or sitting on the sideline or just trying to do things that make me happy, path of least resistance, actually like feeds into this paradigm narrative of like, yeah, that's right. You're my little bitch. Like you're gonna stay here and just rot as a human. So that's my plea. I hope you see it. I think you do, but that's just my thing. Is like I understand what you're saying that suffering is um subjective is a better word that we should use. Suffering is subjective. It's not objective,
Mhm.
right? The Buddhist monk that were protesting whatever lit themselves on fire and we're just like sitting there. Like, I mean, imagine the enlightenment you have to just fucking like sit there and just light yourself on fire.
Self-immolate.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. So,
That's
but like I don't have that, but like I understand what you're saying. Like suffering is subjective, but there are, I think, subjective frames that we have to be willing to break out of. And part of that is chasing your dragon. Peterson talks about a lot, and I talk about a lot because I think it's a good frame. Like the thing that you're afraid of, the thing that you think is going to kill you and conquer you and whatever, like that's what gives you meaning is like trying to pursue that dragon and trying to slay that dragon rather than avoid it, reframe the dragon doesn't exist, everything's cool. Because I think that's feeding into your matrix that you're living in and justifying your paradigm is what I feel. So I think that someday I might actually have your beliefs about it because you've gone through a lot of suffering. But currently I'm like suffering is an inevitable version of reality. So therefore I must bear it or else what's the alternative?
so
Does that
so
make sense? Because I
makes
feel like it's
sense.
like
It makes sense. And man, again, keep in mind, like it's a practice. It took time for me to get to this place. It took work. It took an education, introspection. It took a lot of experience. I do not see things that happened. I don't see it as things happening to me now. I really believe that it's happening for me. Literally all the things that I have experienced that look, dude, those they died. Family members, friends, acquaintances, they are the ones that died. Not me. I'm still here. I'm not going to tell somebody look at the happy side. I abhor that type of thing. And optimism, I have an interesting relationship with that word. I'm more
Mm,
of the frame that look, it is what it is. Let's really see what's reality. It's what it reality is what happened. That's what reality is. Let's look at it how it is without any type of judgments, whether it's bad or good. It's just an event that occurred and accept it. And that's the work that I'm doing wholeheartedly to have as little resistance to things that occur and to accept it as quickly as possible from the fucking person who's driving slow in front of me, right? When I'm in a rush to having a bad month in sales to whatever, right? Dude, we could keep going like another 20, 30 minutes of this conversation and I got to get fucking going. And so here's
yeah.
me right now going like, and there's my resistance, right? And so I'm going, okay, it is what it is. Um, so any last parting words before we go?
I think we agree. I think a lot of it's semantical, like you said. I think you are an advocate of embracing discomfort. I would
Oh
say,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like that word.
depending on what we're talking about, I would use different words. I think we are very aligned on certain things. I think I understand your framing of it. I also understand my framing of it because, like, if you were to talk to me 5 years ago when I was like fucking thought the world was ending and shit, like that kid just had to go through that and then learn, oh wait, the world wasn't ending and it's okay, it's okay. And now I wouldn't suffer in the way that I did back then, like experiencing loss and heartbreak and shit. Like I wouldn't suffer that way anymore because I've already refined myself and have a greater awareness, like you said. Um, so yeah, I think we should just leave it, for the two people watching, I think we should just leave it up to them to figure out what they think about it.
Sounds good. Ladies and gentlemen, I think, been one of our better episodes. Click like, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and we will catch you on the flip side.
Vote for Kamala.